What happens when Christians advocate breaking the law in the name of justice? Let's talk about it. Hello, good people. It is Todd Shannon, data scientist, social commentator, getter of buckets. Politics is complicated. I don't think people give politics its proper due with respect to how complicated it could be. And because people oversimplify and they don't respect the complication and the kind of the subtle nature of many political issues, they have too much confidence when they shouldn't have. They spend too little time really trying to make sure that they have a consistent and coherent application of their political views that extends from their worldview. And just generally speaking, we have a bunch of cognitive dissonance, self-contradictions, and logical fallacies that are rampant with respect to people's political ideas, political views. And unfortunately, that is as prevalent among Christians, if not more so among Christians, than any other group. And so I think this is a classic example of what I mean. What happens when you are so enraptured in your political ideology and in your political camp and tribe that you can't even see that you are literally, quite literally, telling people how to break the law and feeling particularly righteous about it? Unless you can say that the law itself is immoral, right? Then you might have a case. For example, if there was a law or a decree that came out that said we cannot pray to God, such as what we saw happened during Daniel's time in the scriptures, where they outlawed praying to God, and Daniel said, "Well, I'm going to do it anyway." And that's a different situation. But if the law itself is just, if there's no specific biblical objection that you could put forth with respect to the law, then the only Christian thing to do is to honor the law. And that's pretty straightforward. It doesn't need much more explanation. But apparently, maybe we might be wrong about that, because there are Christians out there who don't necessarily see it that way. And let me go back to this here. Before I go here, we're going to go to a news clip here that I was watching on CNN, on Abby Phillips' show, where they talked about that. But this kind of is what sparked this conversation for me, because I was sitting there, quite literally, minding my own business, and I came across this on someone's timeline. Christian brother of mine. We're not particularly close, but I know him well enough. He had this on his page that he had shared, and it says, if ICE agents show up at your door. Now, if you don't know what ICE is, they are charged to enforce the law with respect to immigration. It's Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement is what it stands for. So this is what this gentleman had on his Facebook page, and it says, if ICE agents show up at your door, you do not have to open the door. If you do, stay calm. You have rights. First of all, let's just examine that claim for a moment. There are human rights, right? There are human rights, which extends to every person. And then there are rights that only extend to citizens of the United States. And if you are not a citizen of the United States, the rights that are supposedly they are implicating or being extended to the illegal immigrant do not apply to them. It simply doesn't. If you are in this country illegally, there are certain rights that you do not have that you would otherwise have if you were a citizen. It's just like saying, because my son has a right to eat the food in my house and live in my home, that extends to everyone. No, that doesn't extend to everyone. That extends to my children, because there is a specific set of circumstances that grants him those rights that doesn't apply to people to whom I have no familial relationship. So this is fallacy number one. You don't have a right, if you're illegally in this country, to evade arrest and deportation. Let's just get that correct. But let's continue. Ask what they're there for and ask for an interpreter if you need one. Well, I just have a question. What the heck else reason would the ICE enforcement be at your door for? Why would they be there? And furthermore, if there's no one in the home who is there illegally, then you got nothing to worry about. It's like, I know this, some people can bring up, reasonable objections to this, but generally speaking, let's say you get stopped by the cops and he asks you to get out of the car. Or he says, hey, you mind if I take a look in your trunk? If a cop stopped me and said that to me, I would think it was odd, but I'd say, yeah, sure, you can look in my trunk. I don't know why you want me to get out the car here, but is this going to expedite? I'm just trying to think about what angle gets you out of my hair the quickest. What's going to be the path of least resistance? Because I just want to get on with my life. I know that I haven't done anything wrong. If you're going to look in my car and that's going to be the path of least resistance, then hey, just go ahead and get it over with so I can get on my way. But if you got maybe some dope in the car, then this maybe becomes a little bit of a different situation. Number 3, if they ask to enter, ask if they have a warrant signed by a judge, and if so, ask to see it. See, all of this stuff, this is bizarre. And, the ACLU, which is a cesspool of left-wing ideology, a subversive organization within our nation, you can tell where this is coming from because these left-wing organizations literally don't love America. They don't like America as it is. And that mentality is pervasive amongst anyone who has any penchant or kind of, allegiance with the Democrat Party. Do you have a warrant? All of these are kind of the same. If they do not have a warrant signed by a judge, you may refuse to let them in. Ask them to leave any information at your door. If they force their way in, do not resist. Tell everyone in the residence to remain silent. If you are arrested, you have the right to remain silent. Do not sign anything until you speak with a lawyer. So they're basically teaching people who are either illegal or aiding and abetting illegal immigrants how to basically buck the system. And the first question I ask myself is, how is this not aiding and abetting? And that brings me to the other thing that I wanted to look at, because on Abby Phillips' show, they explore this very concept, and I want to see just what they have to say about it. Let's have a look.
Tonight, an emergency deployment to the border. Donald Trump is dispatching troops to follow through on a promised crackdown on illegal immigration. He's also now issuing threats, vowing to put state and local officials in the Justice Department's crosshairs if they refuse to go along with his federal immigration policy. Joining us now in our fifth seat is CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig. He is a former federal prosecutor. Elie, I don't think any of this would really come as a surprise. As we've discussed a lot, Trump promised to do these things. But when you hear that as an attorney, what are the state's options here if they don't want to cooperate with the federal government?
Yeah, so this memo came out today. This is a 3-page memo issued by the Justice Department by Emil Bove, who used to be Trump's criminal defense lawyer, who's now a very high-ranking official at DOJ. Part of this memo has sent shockwaves through the legal and political world. Part of it is completely normal. Part of it is the new administration doing what all new administrations doing, saying, we are going to prioritize this type of crime. Sometimes it's financial crime, public corruption. Here, it's immigration. That part's normal. The part that's extraordinary, though, is that the Justice Department says, hey, locals, state and local authorities, and by the way, I was federal and state, so I can see this from both sides. If you get in our way, if you obstruct what we're doing, we might prosecute you. Now, it's normal to say, okay, we're the feds, we have this priority, state and locals, we would love your help, we will solicit your help, we expect your help, but to threaten them with prosecution, that is very heavy-handed, and I understand why there's been a lot of pushback to it.
Interesting. I mean, do you think, is that...
Let's just stop right there for a moment and just examine the general premise that this is heavy-handed. Because you know what I think? I think that when people have been getting away with bullcrap for so long, and then they are no longer allowed to get away with things that they shouldn't have been able to get away with, now it feels like persecution and heavy-handedness. The fact that for so long, local and state governments were permitted, as apparently some sort of weird courtesy or gentleman's agreement, to directly obstruct federal proceedings and the application of the law without consequence is insane to me. This is why MAGA 2.0 was so needed, because Donald Trump has come back stronger and wiser and more cunning than ever. And he's realized first of all, there's no value in trying to compromise with these people. The idea, why? Okay, let's just put it in this sense. And we want to try to scale it and try to make it seem like, well, these crimes aren't that bad, so therefore this shouldn't be a big deal. But if the federal government or if the FBI were trying to apprehend some murder suspect, and the local government not only didn't help, but they actively obstructed the apprehension of that suspect, then everyone who did that should go to jail. The fact that they're sitting there talking about that this isn't the normal practice, that if you obstruct what we're trying to do, we're going to prosecute you. The fact that that's not the norm is insane to me. But let's continue.
It's unusual, but is it legal?
So, yes, there's an important distinction. There has been some reporting out there that says the feds have said, we're going to prosecute you locals if you don't comply. That's not really what this memo says. It's not a crime. If the feds call up the Chicago Police Department and say, we're going to be doing an immigration raid and we'd like your help, and the locals say, no, thank you, that's not a crime. That's not what's being threatened in here. What is being threatened is if you commit a crime, if you harbor an illegal alien, which is a federal crime, now typically DOJ has overlooked that, that's within prosecutorial discretion. But what the feds are saying is if you locals, if you harbor an illegal alien, if you obstruct our efforts to enforce this law, then we might prosecute you. Now, technically speaking, that can happen legally, but it is extraordinary for DOJ to actually threaten locals with prosecution.
Yeah.
Is a sanctuary city harboring?
Yeah, so the harboring law basically makes it a crime if you know, and it applies to an official or a private person, if you know someone is an illegal alien and you keep them from the cops, you give them shelter, you help them, technically that's a federal crime. Now,
exactly. It's the very question I asked the gentleman who posted that garbage on his Facebook page. How is this not aiding and abetting? How is this not you instructing people how to resist and obstruct lawful proceedings? You know, there are a few ways you can be dishonest. Several ways you can lie. You can lie by omission. You can lie by exaggeration, right? Or you can bear false witness. And the way people have lied so often, and with respect, let's take a situation like January 6th, is that they've said that January 6th, they tried to obstruct the peaceful transfer of power, and therefore this was an insurrection. This was, people who did this, they should, Donald Trump, obviously pardoned like 1,500 J6ers. This is the worst thing ever. And the reason why this stuff rings so hollow for me and I tell these people to kick rocks is because they are lying by exaggeration and omission. Because they're exaggerating the nature of the crimes. This was not an insurrection. It was not an attempt to overthrow the government. This is people expressing their displeasure with a political outcome that they thought was fraudulent. And they took it too far. The difference between a riot and a protest is riots have destruction of property and violence, and a protest is exactly the same thing without the destruction of property and violence. But oftentimes it's people getting rowdy and people saying things with a lot of vigor and anger and all of those things. But when we're talking about obstructing official proceedings, obstructing the federal government, certainly doesn't rise to the level of an insurrection, but it is breaking the law. And some of the people who went to jail on J6 should have gone to jail. 3.5 years, is that enough time for the crimes that they committed? I think in many cases it's probably appropriate, and in some cases it was excessive, but that's neither here nor there. The question is, what sort of punishment should there be for people who are actively obstructing the deportation of illegal immigrants? Is that not breaking the law? I mean, at the very least, people need to be disincentivized from doing that. And part of disincentivizing things that you don't want is that you make people pay when they do it. How about a month in jail? A hefty fine? 6 months in jail? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. But there certainly should be some sort of real penalty for people who are doing this. And the fact that these people are acting like they're outraged because it's being done is incredible to me. So I just wanted to make a note about that. There is a lot of active resistance to Donald Trump's mass deportation efforts. A lot of people under false pretenses and fake outrage and false calls for justice, like people who broke our laws to be in the country have a right to be here. I'm sorry, you do not. It doesn't matter what your reason is. If you came here illegally, we have every right to deport you, and we should deport you. And that is not even to get into why Democrats let them in the first place. That's a whole nother issue. But I think Donald Trump is doing Command Z, or if you're a PC person, Control Z on all of the illegal immigration in this country. In the next 4 years, we're going to see a lot of that overturned, and I, for one, am thankful for it. But let me know what your thoughts are. Are these people aiding and abetting? I kind of think they are, but I'm curious to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. Until next time, friends, God bless you.